Ladies and gentlemen, there is a divine moment in the spirit realm when the heavens open and prayers ascend with supernatural speed. This is a moment when angels are dispatched, miracles manifest, and strongholds are broken. It is the sacred hour of 3 a.m. worship, the time when prayers are immediately answered. The hour of 3 a.m. is not an ordinary moment in time. It is a divine intersection where heaven meets earth, where the supernatural is heightened and where the spiritual atmosphere shifts. In the stillness of the night, when the world is asleep, a different kind of activity begins in the spirit realm. This is the hour when destinies are revealed, prayers are expedited, and breakthroughs are unlocked. Throughout history, those who have understood the mystery of 3 a.m. worship have walked in extraordinary power and favor. In the Bible, we are said that God moves mightily in the watches of the night. The prophets, the psalmists, and even Jesus himself engaged in prayer and communion with the Father in the early hours of the morning. There is a reason why the presence of God feels stronger at this hour. It is not just about the silence of the world, but about the stirring of heaven. There is something about the deep night that draws the glory of God closer. Something about the emptiness of the streets and the quietness of the earth that allows the sound of worship to penetrate the heavens without resistance. This is also the hour of deep spiritual transactions. There are moments in life when the answers we seek cannot be found in the busyness of the day. There are realms of revelation and encounters that only open when we step into the stillness of night worship. In the Bible, we are said that before the breaking of the dawn, God appeared to his chosen ones. He spoke in visions, sent angels on assignments, and delivered messages that changed the course of history. The encounters of Jacob, Samuel, and Daniel all point to the divine significance of the early morning hours. Something happens when a person chooses to rise at 3 a.m., not out of obligation, but out of a hunger for God. It is a sacrifice that heaven does not ignore. The physical body longs for sleep, but the spirit is wide awake. When an individual lifts their voice in worship at this hour, something shifts. Chains break in the unseen world. Doors that seem permanently shut begin to open, and battles that have raged for years suddenly come to an end. In the Bible, we are said that praise has the power to confuse the enemy. At 3 a.m., when worship rises like incense before the throne of God, the forces of darkness are thrown into disarray. Demonic assignments are canceled, generational curses are reversed, and miracles begin to manifest. Those who understand this mystery do not wait until their situation becomes unbearable. They take hold of the power of 3 a.m. worship and step into a realm where prayers are no longer delayed. This is a time when the voice of the intercessor carries weight, when the cries of the righteous are heard, and when the heavens respond with immediate action. It is not just another hour. It is a divine appointment, a sacred moment set apart for those who dare to believe that God moves when they worship in the night. All throughout Scripture, God has demonstrated his power in the night watches. There is something significant about the hours of darkness, something profound about the moments when the world is still, and only those who are spiritually alert can discern the movements of heaven. In the Bible, we are said that God revealed himself to his servants in dreams, visions, and divine encounters during the night. This is not a coincidence, but a pattern. a blueprint for those who desire to tap into deeper dimensions of his presence. When Jacob was fleeing from his brother, he found himself alone in the wilderness, lying on the ground with a rock as his pillow. In that moment of solitude, the heavens opened, and he saw a ladder reaching from earth to heaven with angels ascending and descending. That encounter marked a turning point in his life, an assurance that he was not abandoned, that God's covenant with him was secure. Had he not been in that quiet, still moment of the night, would he have perceived the supernatural vision? In the Bible, we are said that Samuel heard the voice of God in the night. As a young boy serving in the temple, he was unfamiliar with the sound of God's calling. But it was in the stillness of those sacred hours that the voice of the Lord came to him. While others were sleeping, while the lamp of God was still burning, the Lord spoke. This moment was not just a personal encounter. It was the beginning of his prophetic ministry. It was in the night that he received a word that would shape the destiny of a nation. When Daniel sought understanding about the mysteries of the future, it was during the night that visions came to him. As he pressed into God's presence, refusing to be satisfied with ordinary knowledge, the deep things of the Spirit were revealed to him. He was shown the rise and fall of kingdoms, the unfolding of divine plans, and the establishment of God's eternal reign. The secret things belong to those who are willing to wait on God in the stillness of the night. Those who understand that revelation comes to those who set themselves apart. Even in the life of Jesus, there is a pattern of divine encounters in the night. In the Bible, we are said that he often withdrew to desolate places to pray, sometimes continuing all night in communion with the Father. Before choosing his 12 disciples, before making pivotal decisions, he spent the night in the presence of God. This was not a ritual, but a necessity, an understanding that true power is drawn from intimate fellowship with the Father. There are mysteries locked within the night hours, revelations waiting to be unveiled, encounters reserved for those who press beyond the demands of the day. The night belongs to those who seek him, those who refuse to sleep through their divine moment, those who understand that God is always speaking, if only they are awake to listen. There is a realm in the Spirit that many do not understand, a dimension where battles are won before the break of dawn. The hour of 3 a.m. is not just a time on the clock. It is a moment of deep spiritual activity, where unseen forces collide, where the kingdom of light overthrows the works of darkness, and where those who engage in worship step into divine authority. In the Bible, we are said that the enemy roams around, seeking whom he may devour. But it is also written that those who dwell in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under his shadow. This hour is a time of decision in the heavens, a time when the righteous rise in worship, while the forces of darkness attempt to wage war. In the realm of the Spirit, the night watches are significant. It is no accident that Jesus told his disciples to watch and pray, knowing that the greatest betrayals, attacks, and moments of trial often manifest in the late hours. In the Bible, we are said that as Jesus prayed in Gethsemane, the forces of darkness gathered, and the weight of the coming sacrifice pressed upon him. The disciples slept, unaware of the intensity of what was happening in the Spirit, but Jesus remained in prayer. He understood that battles are not won in the daylight. They are won in the hours when others slumber. There are spiritual transactions that take place at 3 a.m. It is a time when demonic altars are raised, but it is also a time when true worship dismantles every evil assignment. In the Bible, we are said that when Gideon was called to destroy the altar of Baal, he did so in the night because it was in those hours that the powers of darkness were most active. The tearing down of strongholds is not a work of convenience, but of spiritual alignment. Those who wake up in worship at this hour do not do so by accident. It is because the Spirit of God is stirring them to take authority. The enemy knows that if he can keep a person spiritually asleep at the most critical moments, he can delay their destiny. In the Bible, we are said that while men slept, the enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat. There are things that are stolen from people's lives in the hours of the night: health, finances, relationships, peace. But when a person rises up in worship, they take back what was lost. The night watches are a time to decree and declare, to push back against every assignment of the adversary, and to establish God's will over every situation. Those who understand the power of 3 a.m. worship do not wait for trouble to come before they pray. They are ahead of the battle, stepping into the realm where victories are secured before daylight ever breaks. It is in these sacred moments that miracles are set in motion, that divine interventions take place, and that heaven moves in response to the cries of the righteous. There is a realm beyond what the natural eyes can see, a dimension where heaven is active and angelic movements are at their peak. The hour of 3 a.m. is not just a time of silence on earth. It is a time when the spirit realm is most alive, when the forces of light and darkness engage, and when divine messengers are sent forth on assignments. In the Bible, we are said that angels are ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation. These heavenly beings do not operate randomly, but according to divine timing, and the night hours are often when they are most active. When Jacob was alone in the wilderness, he saw in a dream a ladder stretching from earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending upon it. He woke up in awe, realizing that he had stepped into a gateway between two realms. This was not just a dream, it was a revelation of how heaven operates. The movement of angels was not one-directional. They ascended and descended, carrying out divine assignments, delivering messages, enforcing God's will on the earth. The fact that this encounter happened in the night speaks to the supernatural activity that unfolds when the world is unaware. In the Bible, we are said that Peter was imprisoned, bound by chains, and guarded by soldiers. Yet in the middle of the night, an angel of the Lord appeared. The chains fell off, the doors opened, and he was led out without anyone being able to stop him. This was not a natural escape. It was the intervention of heaven at an hour when men were asleep. The church had been praying, and their prayers aligned with heaven's timing, activating angelic assistance. The realm of the Spirit is governed by principles, and one of those principles is that divine encounters often happen when the natural world is at rest. There are testimonies of those who have experienced angelic visitations, supernatural deliverances, and divine instructions in the early hours of the morning. These encounters are not random. They are the result of a spiritual alignment that happens when worship rises at the right time. In the Bible, we are said that Daniel saw visions in the night, that Ezekiel was taken into prophetic experiences, and that Joseph received life-altering messages through dreams. These revelations came not when the world was awake and distracted, but when the heavens were open in the stillness of the night. When a person engages in worship at 3 a.m., they are stepping into the realm where angelic activity is heightened. They are aligning themselves with a divine moment where supernatural assistance is released. There are battles that are not fought with human effort, but with the help of God's messengers. There are answers that do not come through earthly means, but through divine revelation. The night is not just a time to rest. It is a time to encounter heaven, to receive direction, and to move in sync with what God is doing in the unseen realm. There are moments in life when prayers seem to linger, when answers feel delayed, and when breakthrough appears just out of reach. But there are also moments when heaven moves instantly, when the response to prayer is immediate, and when the manifestation of God's power is undeniable. The hour of 3 a.m. carries a divine mystery, a window in the Spirit where prayers ascend without resistance and answers are released with supernatural speed. In the Bible, we are said that before we call, God answers, and while we are still speaking, He hears. This is not just a promise, it is a spiritual reality that those who engage in worship at the right time begin to experience. When Elijah stood before the prophets of Baal, he called upon the name of the Lord, and fire fell immediately. There was no delay, no hesitation. Heaven responded in an instant. The reason was not just his faith, but his alignment with divine timing. There are prayers that take time to unfold because of spiritual warfare, but there are also prayers that, when released in the right moment, bring immediate results. The night hours, especially 3 a.m., are times when the resistance in the Spirit is weakest for those who walk in obedience. Worship at this hour creates an open heaven, a direct access point where the power of God moves freely. In the Bible, we are said that Peter and John encountered a lame man at the temple gate, and with just a word, his healing was immediate. There was no waiting period, no gradual improvement. His legs received strength instantly. The presence of God operates outside of time. But there are moments when heaven moves so swiftly that what was impossible just seconds before becomes a reality in an instant. When Jesus spoke to the storm, the winds and waves obeyed immediately. When he commanded demons to flee, they left without delay. When he called Lazarus from the grave, life returned without hesitation. Worship at 3 a.m. taps into that same dimension of power, that same realm where heaven moves without obstruction. In the Bible, we are said that when Daniel prayed, his answer was dispatched immediately, but the prince of Persia delayed it. There are battles in the Spirit that sometimes interfere with the manifestation of answers, but when a believer rises at the appointed hour, their worship creates a force that clears the path for divine responses. There are testimonies of those who have experienced supernatural death cancellations, sudden healings, and miraculous turnarounds after engaging in worship at 3 a.m. These are not coincidences, but evidence of a divine principle. When a person chooses to lift their voice in the stillness of the night, when they push past sleep and step into radical worship, they position themselves to receive from heaven in ways they never imagined. The difference between waiting for years and receiving in moments often comes down to obedience to divine timing. Worship opens doors that nothing else can, and at the appointed time, prayers are not just heard, they are immediately answered. There is a realm of divine encounters that only opens to those who seek God in the secret place, a dimension of His presence that is not accessed through routine prayers, but through deep sacrificial worship. The hour of 3 a.m. is not just a time of prayer. It is a time of encounter, a moment when God reveals Himself in ways that change lives forever. In the Bible, we are said that those who seek Him diligently will find Him. There is a depth of revelation, a closeness to God that is reserved for those who are willing to go beyond convenience and step into the realm of divine pursuit. When Moses ascended the mountain to meet with God, he separated himself from the crowd, from distractions, and from the ordinary. He positioned himself to hear directly from the voice of the Almighty. What he received in that moment was not just instruction, but an encounter that left his face shining with the glory of God. He did not return the same, because true encounters transform a person from the inside out. Those who engage in worship at 3 a.m. are stepping into that same dimension, a place where God's presence is so tangible that it changes everything about them. In the Bible, we are said that Isaiah had a vision of the Lord, high and lifted up, and the train of His robe filled the temple. This was not just a dream. It was an encounter that redefined his entire life. He saw the holiness of God. He was cleansed, and he received a divine commission. This is what happens in the presence of God when a person presses in beyond the surface. Worship at 3 a.m. is not about asking for things. It is about seeking His face, about longing for the kind of intimacy that shifts atmospheres, changes destinies, and marks a person for life. Jacob wrestled with an angel all night until the breaking of the dawn, refusing to let go until he was blessed. This was more than a struggle. It was a divine encounter that changed his identity from Jacob the deceiver to Israel, the one who prevails with God. Encounters in the night hours have the power to rewrite destinies, to break cycles that have held families for generations, to release a person into their true calling. In the Bible, we are said that when God calls a person by name, it is because He has set them apart for something greater. The night watch is when those callings are revealed, when God deposits things in the Spirit that cannot be received at any other time. There are testimonies of people who have experienced visions of heaven, supernatural visitations, and life-changing instructions in the early morning hours. These moments are not reserved for a select few. They are available to anyone willing to press into His presence. Worship at 3 a.m. is an invitation to experience God in a way that leaves no one unchanged. Those who accept this invitation step into a realm where heaven becomes real, where the voice of God becomes clear, and where His presence becomes the only thing that truly matters. My friends, there is a realm where heaven and earth collide, where prayers become supernatural keys unlocking divine encounters. Right now, someone is on the verge of an answered prayer, but the question is, how does it happen? How do we know when heaven has heard and answered our cry? When we pray, the very first assurance we must hold on to is that God hears every prayer. The moment words leave our lips or even form in the depths of our hearts, they are not lost in the vastness of the universe. They do not dissipate into nothingness. There is a divine listener, the creator of heaven and earth, who inclines his ear to his people. In the Bible, we are said that before we even call, he answers. And while we are still speaking, he listens. That means that not a single prayer goes unnoticed. Even the quietest whispers of desperation and the loudest cries of faith are received in the throne room of heaven. Many people wonder if their prayers are truly heard, especially when they do not see immediate results. But in the Bible, we are said that his ears are attentive to the righteous. That means if a person is seeking him sincerely, if their heart is aligned with his will, then their voice reaches him without obstruction. There are times when prayers seem to go unanswered, but that is never because they were unheard. The delay in seeing the manifestation is often a part of God's greater plan. When Daniel prayed, his answer was dispatched immediately, yet a battle in the spiritual realm caused a delay. This confirms that from the very first moment a prayer is uttered, it is registered in heaven. The response may come in a different way than expected, but it is never ignored. God does not operate on human schedules. There are moments when he responds before the words are even fully spoken. Other times he waits until the perfect moment, allowing faith to be stretched, character to be built, and divine alignment to take place. In the Bible, we are said that he hears the cries of his people and delivers them. That means the evidence of his listening ear is not just in the hearing, but in the divine response that follows. Some answers come in the form of peace that surpasses understanding. Others come through people unexpectedly showing up with the right word at the right time. And sometimes the answer arrives as a supernatural shift in circumstances that no one could have orchestrated but God. The greatest assurance is knowing that God is not distant, indifferent, or selective in his listening. He is near to the brokenhearted and attentive to all who call on him in truth, even when a person feels alone, unheard, or insignificant. Heaven's attention is still on them. This is why faith must be anchored in the certainty that every prayer is received. It is why, even in silence, trust must remain, because the God who created the heavens and the earth, who formed every living thing, who holds the stars in place, he listens. And when he listens, he moves. When a prayer is sent to heaven, the answer does not always come immediately. There is a divine process at work, and timing plays a crucial role in how and when the response manifests. Every person who has walked in faith has at some point wondered why certain prayers are answered instantly, while others take days, months, or even years. But God operates on a higher timeline, one that is not bound by human limitations. In the Bible, we are said that there is a season for everything, a time for every purpose under heaven. That means every answered prayer is released at the appointed time, not a moment too soon and not a second too late. When Joseph had his dreams of greatness, he was just a young man full of promise. He saw visions of authority, of a future where he would be in a position of influence. But instead of immediate fulfillment, he found himself sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. For years, it seemed as though the dream had been forgotten, but heaven had not forgotten. The delay was not a denial, it was preparation. In the Bible, we are said that the word of the Lord tested him until the time of his fulfillment came. That means Joseph's journey was not a mistake. It was a refining process. If the answer had come too soon, he would not have been ready to carry the responsibility that came with the blessing. Abraham and Sarah were given a promise, but the years passed and their arms remained empty. They could not understand why their desire for a child remained unfulfilled when the word had already been spoken over them. But heaven's clock was still ticking, and God had appointed a set time for the promise to be made manifest. In the Bible, we are said that at the appointed time, Sarah conceived and bore a son. This shows that there are prayers already answered in the spiritual realm, just waiting for the perfect moment to be revealed on earth. Sometimes the delay is not because God is withholding the answer, but because certain things need to align. There may be lessons to be learned, people to be positioned, and circumstances to shift before the fullness of the answer can be seen. When Jesus received word that Lazarus was sick, he did not go immediately. Instead, he waited. By the time he arrived, Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. To those around him, it seemed too late, but the delay was divine. In the Bible, we are said that Jesus declared, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" The miracle was not just about healing, but about revealing a greater level of God's power. Heaven's timing is perfect, even when it is not understood. The waiting is not wasted, and the answer is never forgotten. What seems like a delay in human eyes is often divine alignment in God's hands. Faith is the key that unlocks the supernatural. When a prayer is spoken in faith, it is not just words floating in the air. It becomes a powerful force that moves the hand of God. In the Bible, we are said that without faith it is impossible to please God. For those who come to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Faith is more than just hoping for an answer. It is the assurance that what is asked for has already been set in motion. It is the ability to see beyond the natural and grasp hold of the promise before it manifests. When the woman with the issue of blood pressed through the crowd, she had no guarantee that she would be healed. She had suffered for years, spent all her resources, and found no cure. But something within her knew that if she could just touch the hem of Jesus' garment, she would be made whole. She didn't need a conversation, a special prayer, or even direct attention. Just a single touch. In the Bible, we are said that when she touched him, power left his body and immediately she was healed. Her faith activated the supernatural. Others were pressing against Jesus, but only one received a miracle because only one touched him with unwavering faith. There was a centurion who understood authority, and when his servant was sick, he came to Jesus asking for healing. But instead of asking Jesus to come to his home, he simply said, "Speak the word and my servant will be healed." He believed that just one word from Jesus was enough to change everything. In the Bible, we are said that Jesus marveled at his faith, declaring that he had not found such great faith in all of Israel. And at that very moment, the servant was healed. The power was not in physical presence, but in the authority of faith. Faith does not operate based on what is seen or felt. It stands firm even when circumstances suggest otherwise. When Peter saw Jesus walking on the water, he took a step of faith and did the impossible. He walked on water, but the moment he shifted his focus to the wind and waves, doubt crept in and he began to sink. In the Bible, we're said that Jesus reached out his hand and asked, "Why did you doubt?" The supernatural is sustained by faith, and the moment doubt takes over, the miracle begins to fade. God responds to faith, not just words. There are moments when a prayer is answered instantly, and there are times when faith must be tested through waiting. But in every situation, faith is the force that connects heaven and earth. It is not about how big the request is, but how strong the belief is. In the Bible, we are said that if anyone has faith as small as a mustard seed, they can speak to a mountain and it will move. Faith does not beg, it declares, expects, and receives. Obedience is a doorway to answered prayers. Many times, the breakthrough that is being sought is directly tied to an instruction that has already been given. When God speaks, He is not just giving suggestions. He is releasing the key to unlock what has been requested. In the Bible, we are said that if we are willing and obedient, we will eat the good of the land. That means that obedience is not just about submission, it is about positioning. The fulfillment of a promise often requires action, and until that action is taken, the answer remains unseen. When the widow of Zarephath was gathering sticks to prepare her last meal, she had already accepted that death was inevitable. But then came a prophetic instruction to first make a small cake for the prophet before making food for herself and her son. It made no sense in the natural. How could giving away the last bit of food lead to provision? But obedience to that instruction shifted everything. In the Bible, we are said that her jar of flour was not used up, and her jug of oil never ran dry. The miracle was waiting on her act of obedience. Naaman was a commander, a man of great power, but he was afflicted with leprosy. He traveled far to seek healing from the prophet, expecting a dramatic encounter. Instead, he was told to go and wash in the Jordan River 7 times. It was not what he wanted to hear. The river was not special. There were better waters elsewhere. He almost walked away from his breakthrough because the instruction did not align with his expectations. But when he finally obeyed, his flesh was restored like that of a young child. In the Bible, we are said that obedience is better than sacrifice. The answer was not in the river, but in his willingness to follow the command without question. When Jesus encountered a man who was blind, he did not just speak healing over him. Instead, he made mud, placed it on the man's eyes, and gave a specific instruction to go and wash in the pool of Siloam. The healing did not manifest immediately. The man had to walk, still blind, still unable to see, and follow the command before the miracle took place. In the Bible, we are said that when he washed, his sight was restored. The answer was already prepared, but it was his obedience that brought it to completion. God's instructions are often the bridge between prayer and manifestation. Sometimes they make no logical sense. Sometimes they require stepping into unfamiliar territory or doing something that feels uncomfortable. But every time a divine command is obeyed, it activates something in the supernatural. There are moments when the delay in an answer is not because God has not heard, but because the step of obedience has not yet been taken. In the Bible, we are said that those who hear his words and put them into practice are like a wise man who built his house on a solid foundation. Obedience is not just a test. It is the pathway to divine fulfillment. Angelic intervention is often at work behind the scenes when prayers are answered. The supernatural realm is more active than many realize, and God sends his messengers to deliver, protect, and bring forth his will. In the Bible, we are said that angels are ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation. That means there are unseen forces operating in alignment with divine instruction, ensuring that what has been spoken in prayer comes to pass. Daniel prayed and fasted for understanding, and for 21 days he saw no visible response. Yet from the moment he prayed, an angel was dispatched with the answer. The delay was not due to God ignoring him, but because there was spiritual warfare in the heavens. In the Bible, we are said that the prince of Persia resisted the angel, requiring Michael, the archangel, to step in and fight. This confirms that many delays are not denials, but battles in the unseen realm. Just because an answer has not yet manifested does not mean it has not already been released. When Peter was in prison, the church prayed earnestly for his release. From a human perspective, there was no way out. The chains were tight, the guards were alert, and the prison doors were locked. But heaven had already sent help. In the Bible, we are said that an angel appeared, struck Peter on the side, and told him to get up quickly. The chains fell off, the gates opened on their own, and Peter walked out of captivity untouched. This was not just an answer to prayer, it was divine intervention through Lot and his family were living in a city marked for destruction. The warning had been given, but hesitation lingered. Judgment was coming, and there was no time to waste. In the Bible, we are said that the angels took hold of Lot, his wife, and his daughters, and led them out before fire and brimstone fell. Their deliverance was not by their own strength, but by the hands of angels who had been sent to rescue them. Even when uncertainty caused them to delay, divine messengers ensured they reached safety. Elisha's servant was overwhelmed when he saw an army surrounding them, convinced that defeat was inevitable. Fear gripped him because he could only see with natural eyes. But Elisha prayed, and his servant's eyes were opened. In the Bible, we are said that suddenly he saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire surrounding them. The heavenly army had been there all along, unseen but present, waiting to act. The battle was never just physical. The spiritual forces of God had already ensured victory. Angels are not distant beings of ancient stories. They are active in the lives of believers even now. Many have encountered divine protection without realizing it, experienced unexplainable help in moments of crisis, or felt a strong presence in times of deep prayer. Answers to prayers often come through angelic assignments, working invisibly but powerfully to bring forth what has been declared from the throne of God. Spiritual warfare is often the unseen battle behind delayed answers to prayer. The moment a person prays, something shifts in the supernatural, but opposition arises to hinder the manifestation. There is a real adversary who does not want prayers to be answered, because every answered prayer is a testimony of God's power and faithfulness. In the Bible, we are said that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against rulers, authorities, and spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. That means there are forces at work trying to block, resist, or delay what has already been declared in heaven. Daniel fasted and prayed for clarity, and though his answer was sent immediately, it did not reach him right away. The delay was not on God's part, but because a spiritual battle was taking place. In the Bible, we are said that the prince of Persia opposed the angel carrying the answer until Michael, the archangel, came to assist. This means that sometimes prayers are answered in the spiritual realm before they are seen in the natural. There are battles being fought over breakthroughs, and persistence in prayer is what strengthens the victory. Just because the answer is not visible yet does not mean it is not on the way. Jesus warned Peter that Satan had asked to sift him like wheat, meaning the enemy wanted to shake his faith, break him, and stop him from fulfilling his calling. But Jesus did not just tell Peter to be careful. He told him that he had already prayed for him. In the Bible, we are said that when Peter turned back, he was to strengthen his brothers. The attack was real, but intercession was already in place. Prayer is not just about asking. It is about standing firm against spiritual resistance. Job experienced intense suffering, and though it seemed like his afflictions came from natural causes, there was a greater battle happening behind the scenes. The enemy was attempting to break him, to make him curse God, to destroy his faith. But in the Bible, we are said that Job held on, and in the end, he was restored with double what he had lost. The testing was severe, but perseverance brought about victory. Paul spoke of a thorn in his flesh, something that tormented him and sought to weaken him. He prayed 3 times for it to be removed, but instead of immediate relief, he received an answer that God's grace was sufficient. In the Bible, we are said that his strength is made perfect in weakness. Sometimes the battle is not about removal, but about endurance. There are moments when the resistance remains because God is producing something greater through the struggle. Every prayer spoken in faith is heard, but persistence is necessary because resistance exists. The enemy does not want healing to come, doors to open, or breakthroughs to happen. But prayer is the weapon that tears down strongholds. When a person refuses to give up, continues to stand on God's promises, and remains steadfast, the battle in the supernatural shifts. Victory is not always instant, but it is always guaranteed for those who do not waver. God's will is the foundation upon which every answered prayer rests. When prayers align with his divine plan, they carry the full backing of heaven. Many times people pray with urgency, expecting an immediate response. But the key to receiving is not just persistence, it is alignment. In the Bible, we are said that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. That means not every request will be granted the way it was asked, but every request that aligns with his purpose will come to pass. Jesus himself demonstrated this when he prayed in the garden before his crucifixion. The weight of what was ahead was overwhelming, and in his humanity he asked for the cup to pass from him, but he did not stop there. He surrendered to the higher plan, saying, "Not my will, but yours be done." In the Bible, we are said that because of this surrender, the greatest victory in history was accomplished. His suffering led to salvation for all. If he had only sought personal relief, the purpose of redemption would not have been fulfilled. Hannah longed for a child and prayed earnestly for years. Her request was not granted right away, but when she aligned her prayer with God's purpose, everything changed. She vowed that if he gave her a son, she would dedicate him to his service. In the Bible, we are said that after this, she conceived and gave birth to Samuel, who became a mighty prophet. The delay was not denial, it was a call to deeper alignment. The moment her request matched God's plan, the answer was released. Paul, a man full of faith and revelation, prayed 3 times for a thorn in his flesh to be removed. But the response he received was not what he expected. Instead of deliverance, he was given a greater revelation that God's grace was sufficient and his power was made perfect in weakness. In the Bible, we are said that sometimes what is withheld is not a rejection, but a redirection towards something far greater. If every request was answered in the way it was made, some of the greatest lessons, testimonies, and breakthroughs would never happen. God sees beyond the immediate need. There are moments when the answer is yes, moments when it is wait, and moments when it is no, because something better is prepared. When the Israelites asked for a king, they were given Saul because it was what they wanted, even though it was not God's perfect will. But later, he raised up David, a man after his own heart, to fulfill the true plan. In the Bible, we are said that his thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and his ways are higher than our ways. That means trust must be greater than understanding. Prayer is not about convincing God to do something. It is about aligning with what he is already doing. The more a person surrenders to his will, the more they see prayers answered in ways beyond what they could have imagined. When requests are made with an open heart, willing to receive his best rather than just immediate relief, the outcome is always far greater than what was originally asked. Divine timing is the unseen force that governs when and how a prayer is answered. God is never late, never early, but always on time, working in ways that often do not align with human expectations. There are moments when prayers are answered immediately, and there are times when waiting is required. In the Bible, we are said that for everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. That means even when it seems like nothing is happening, God is orchestrating events behind the scenes, setting things in place for the right moment. Abraham was promised a son, but the fulfillment did not come right away. Years passed, doubts arose, and human reasoning tried to step in. Sarah, believing she was too old, suggested another way through Hagar. But what is birthed outside of God's timing often leads to struggle rather than blessing. In the Bible, we are said that when the appointed time came, Sarah conceived and gave birth to Isaac, the child of promise. The delay was not a denial. It was preparation for something far greater than they had imagined. Joseph received dreams of greatness as a young man, but instead of immediate fulfillment, he was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and later imprisoned. Every step seemed to take him further from what God had shown him. But in the Bible, we are said that in one moment, Pharaoh called for him, and he was lifted from the prison to the palace. The years of waiting were not wasted. They were shaping him for the responsibility ahead. If he had been elevated too soon, he would not have been prepared to handle the position God had for him. Lazarus was sick, and his sisters sent word to Jesus, expecting him to come quickly and heal him. But instead of rushing to their side, Jesus waited. By the time he arrived, Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. From a human perspective, the delay seemed like neglect, but in the Bible we are said that Jesus declared he was the resurrection and the life, and he called Lazarus out of the grave. The delay was not denial, it was positioning for a greater testimony. If Jesus had come earlier, they would have seen healing, but because he waited, they witnessed resurrection power. God's timing is often misunderstood because it does not conform to human schedules. The disciples were caught in a storm and the waves were crashing against their boat. It seemed like Jesus was absent when they needed him most. But in the Bible, we are said that in the 4th watch of the night, he came walking on the water. He did not come at the beginning of the storm or the middle. He came at the moment that would demonstrate his authority over the wind and the wave. Waiting on God requires trust, patience, and faith that his plan is unfolding exactly as it should. What seems like a delay is often divine preparation. The answer does not always come when expected, but when it does, it arrives with power, purpose, and a testimony that could not have been written any other way. Faith is the foundation upon which answered prayer stands. Without faith, prayer becomes nothing more than words, but with faith, it becomes a force that moves mountains. God responds to faith, not just need. In the Bible, we are said that without faith, it is impossible to please God. That means every time a person approaches him, they must believe not only that he exists, but that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. The difference between a delayed answer and a manifested miracle is often the unwavering confidence that God will do what he has promised. When the woman with the issue of blood pressed through the crowd, she had no guarantee that touching Jesus' garment would work, but she had faith. She did not wait for him to call her out or lay hands on her. She reached out in belief, and immediately power flowed from him to heal her. In the Bible, we are said that Jesus told her it was her faith that had made her whole. Her need was great, but it was her faith that activated the answer. Many people surrounded Jesus that day, but only one person pulled a miracle from him. Blind Bartimaeus was sitting by the roadside when he heard that Jesus was passing by. He could not see, but he could hear, and what he heard stirred faith within him. He cried out, refusing to be silenced because he believed that his answer was near. In the Bible, we are said that Jesus stopped and called for him, asking what he wanted. Bartimaeus declared his desire to receive sight, and because of his faith, he was instantly healed. His persistence was a demonstration of his belief that the moment he encountered Jesus, his situation would change. The centurion who approached Jesus on behalf of his servant understood something that many others did not. He recognized that authority is not limited by proximity. He did not ask Jesus to come to his house. He simply asked him to speak the word. In the Bible, we are said that Jesus marveled at his faith, saying that he had not found such great faith even in Israel. His servant was healed at that very moment. His faith did not require a sign. He believed that once the word was spoken, the answer was already in motion. Faith does not waver when circumstances look impossible. Abraham was given a promise that he would be the father of many nations, yet in the natural, he and Sarah were beyond childbearing years. But in the Bible, we are said that he did not stagger in unbelief, but was fully convinced that what God had promised, he was also able to perform. That unwavering faith brought the promise to fulfillment. God moves in response to faith, not faith in human ability, not faith in circumstances, but faith in his power and faithfulness. When a person prays with the confidence that God not only hears but answers, they position themselves for supernatural results. Faith is not based on what is seen, but on the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not yet visible. When faith is present, heaven responds, and what was once impossible becomes reality.